The kingdom of Aramis stood tall in the heart of the mountains, its golden towers piercing the sky like spears of light. To the world, it was a place of wealth, tradition, and order. But beneath the glittering rooftops lay sharp divisions. Nobles walked marbled halls in silks and jewels, while servants toiled in shadows, their faces lined with exhaustion, their voices silenced by duty. It was in this world of rigid walls that Prince Caelan grew up, the heir to a throne that demanded obedience, strength, and unyielding loyalty to tradition. But Caelan was different from the kings before him. Where others saw duty, he saw people. Where others prized pride, he carried compassion. His heart leaned toward kindness more than power, and it was this heart that drew him to Elira. Elira was no one of note. A servant girl in the palace kitchens, her life was shaped by hard work and silence. Yet even in her quietness, she carried a strength that shone brighter than any jewel in the king's crown. She moved with grace, her dark eyes reflecting both sorrow and hope. Caelan noticed her not as a servant, but as someone real, someone who seemed untouched by the coldness of courtly life. Their story began not with grand declarations, but with stolen moments. A glance across the great hall during a banquet, where Caelan's gaze lingered longer than it should have. A soft smile exchanged in passing, unnoticed by all except the two of them. Small sparks at first. Fragile, dangerous, yet impossible to ignore. Soon, those sparks grew into secret meetings in the palace gardens. By day, the gardens were filled with noble guests, their laughter ringing out beneath the statues of long-dead kings. But by night, the world fell silent, the air thick with the scent of roses and night-blooming jasmine. There, under the watch of the moon, Caelan and Elira would meet. Caelan would step from the shadows in plain clothes, shedding the armor of his title. Elira would arrive cautiously, her hands trembling at the thought of discovery, yet her eyes lighting when they found his. In those hushed hours, time itself seemed to pause. They spoke of dreams, the prince who longed to be free of the chains of duty, and the servant who dared to imagine a life beyond obedience. They shared laughter, soft and rare, and with each word, each look, their bond deepened. Their love was pure, innocent, yet born in the wrong place and time. And still, the danger lingered. At banquets, Caelan would steal glances at Elira as she poured wine into golden cups, her face lowered in humility. Their eyes would meet for the briefest second, and in that instant, the crowded hall of nobles and courtiers faded into nothing. Only the two of them existed in that silent exchange. Yet in every heartbeat of joy, a shadow followed. The knowledge that if they were discovered, their world would collapse. Caelan knew the laws of his house. Princes were to marry for alliances, not affection. Love was a weakness, a fire that threatened the structure of the throne. To choose a servant would not only shame him, but bring scandal upon the crown. Still, he could not turn away. For Elira, the risk was even greater. Discovery would mean disgrace, punishment, perhaps even death. Yet her heart betrayed her reason, for it beat only for him. Each night in the garden, as Caelan brushed his hand against hers, Elira felt torn between fear and wonder. His touch promised everything she had never dared to dream: love, freedom, and belonging. But her heart whispered warnings too. This cannot last. Someone will see, someone will know, and someone would. For in the palace of Aramis, nothing remained hidden for long. Watchful eyes lingered in the shadows, nobles jealous of Caelan's gentle spirit, rivals eager to twist affection into weakness. A seed of betrayal was already planted, waiting for its moment to grow. But for now, Caelan and Elira clung to the fragile beauty of their secret love. Against the cruelty of the world, they chose each other, even if it was only in stolen moments beneath the moon. Theirs was a love like a candle in the dark, glowing softly, beautifully, but always one breath away from being extinguished. And though they did not yet know it, that candlelight would soon set fire to the throne itself. The palace of Aramis was a place of polished marble floors and towering ceilings, but beneath its beauty lurked poison. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps, and secrets were often bought and sold like gold. Prince Calin and Elira believed their love was hidden in shadows. Yet shadows have a way of drawing eyes. One pair of eyes belonged to Lord Vaynor. Vaynor was a noble of sharp tongue and sharper ambition. He had long sought favor in the royal court, dreaming of power greater than his title allowed. To him, Caelin's gentle nature was a weakness, and Elira, a servant daring to catch the prince's eye, was an opportunity. One night, while slipping through the garden paths, Vaynor saw what should never have been seen. He watched Caelin brush a stray strand of hair from Elira's face, his hand lingering in tenderness. He saw the way she looked at him, not as a servant looks at a master, but as two souls who belong to one another. In that instant, Vaynor knew he had found the weapon he needed. He did not reveal his discovery at once. Instead, he sharpened it like a blade. For days, he wove whispers into the ears of courtiers. The prince is distracted. His mind is not on the throne. His heart is lost where it should not be. He spoke in riddles at first, but slowly the rumors spread. Servants grew fearful, nobles curious, and soon the king himself began to hear the murmur of scandal. The king of Aramis was a man of iron tradition. His rule had brought order, but not warmth. To him, the throne was sacred, its strength tied to bloodlines and alliances. A servant girl in the arms of his heir was not just a disgrace, it was a crack in the very foundation of the kingdom. Toward Vaynor struck when doubt already clouded the king's mind. "My king," he said one morning in the council chamber, bowing low with practiced humility, "I bring you grave news. The prince has given his heart where it does not belong, to a servant, to a girl unworthy of his blood, unworthy of the throne." The king's face darkened, though his eyes betrayed pain. "These are heavy words, Vaynor. If they are false, you speak treason." Vaynor did not flinch. He produced witnesses, servants eager to save themselves, courtiers eager to please. Each told of glances too long, meetings too frequent, words too tender. Piece by piece, the picture was painted until even the king could not deny it. And so the judgment was called. The great hall filled with nobles in silks, servants in rags, and guards in steel. The throne loomed above them all, heavy with gold and history. Prince Calin stood before it, shoulders squared but heart pounding. Beside him, Elira was forced forward, her head bowed in shame. The king's voice thundered across the hall. "Calin, son of Aramis, heir to this throne, you have broken the law of blood. You have dishonored the crown. What defense have you?" Caelin's eyes burned with defiance. "I have no defense but love. My heart chose not by station, but by truth. Elira is worthy not because of her birth, but because of who she is. If that is dishonor, then I accept it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some looked away in pity, others in outrage. The king's jaw tightened, for the gates of Aramis closed behind Prince Calin with a thunderous sound that echoed like the breaking of chains. He left not as a prince, but as a man stripped of title, wealth, and home. What lay before him was an open road, lined with dust, danger, and despair. At first, Calin stumbled under the weight of his fall. He had known privilege all his life. Warm meals, fine clothes, respect at every turn. Now he tasted hunger. His feet blistered, his cloak wore thin, and the world that once bowed before him now turned away in indifference. In villages beyond Aramis, Strangers looked at him not as a noble but as another wanderer, ragged and weary. When he told them who he once was, they laughed or cursed, calling him a liar or a fool. Kalen learned quickly that his title had no meaning here. Survival demanded more than pride. Days turned into months, and months into years. Kalen saw war tear through distant lands, saw men fight for bread, and children beg for water. He labored in fields for scraps, slept beneath trees, and bore the sting of betrayal when those he trusted stole what little he had. Yet in each trial, he grew stronger. The softness of the prince hardened into resilience, and the boy who once dreamed beneath marble ceilings became a man forged by dust and fire. But through all of it, Illyra's face stayed with him. Her eyes, her voice, her vow to endure. These were the flames that kept him walking when despair clawed at his back. He carried her in his heart as a compass, pointing him forward when the world threatened to break him. Back in the palace of Aramis, Illyra's suffering was no less cruel. Branded before the court, she was marked as shame incarnate. The nobles sneered when she passed, their whispers sharp as knives. Servants avoided her, fearful that her disgrace might stain them as well. Tasks once shared became burdens thrown upon her shoulders alone. Yet Illyra did not bend. The brand upon her arm burned still, but she refused to hide it. If the court wished to see her as unworthy, she would stand tall in defiance. Her days were filled with endless labor, scrubbing floors until her hands cracked, carrying heavy trays until her arms ached. But in the quiet hours, she gave what little comfort she could to others. When a younger servant cried from exhaustion, Illyra whispered words of strength. When an old cook faltered under the weight of the noble's demands, Illyra stepped forward to ease the burden. In this way, she became a quiet flame of resilience within the palace. The brand meant to shame her became a symbol of survival. Those who once looked at her with pity began to look with respect. But at night, when the halls grew silent and the stars shone through her window, Illyra's strength broke. She would sit in the darkness, clutching the scar on her arm, and let tears fall for the man torn from her side. Still, she whispered into the night, "Kalen will return. I will wait, no matter how long." The years marched on. Kalen and Illyra lived in separate worlds, yet their journeys were bound together. Kalen became a soldier in foreign wars, not for glory, but for bread. He learned to wield a blade, not with arrogance, but with necessity. Each battle scar was a reminder of the boy he once was, and the man he was becoming. Though the world hardened him, it never stole his compassion. He tended to the wounded, comforted the dying, and shared what little food he had. Those who traveled with him began to follow not just his sword, but his heart. Illyra, too, grew into quiet strength. Within the palace, she became the one servants turned to for guidance. Though nobles tried to silence her, she found ways to slip bread to the hungry, medicine to the sick, and hope to the broken. She became a voice in whispers, a reminder that kindness still lived even in the coldest halls. Time did not stop for either of them. The king of Aramis aged, his body weakening under the weight of years and regret. Lord Vaynor, ever hungry, tightened his grip upon the court, taxing the people until their stomachs ached with hunger. The kingdom, once proud, began to crumble from within. And then, in a far-off land, a rumor reached Kalen's ears. They said Aramis was sick. The king's health was failing. The people groaned beneath Vaynor's rule. Whispers stirred of rebellion, of a kingdom in need of hope. And in the taverns and markets, Kalen heard his own name spoken in hushed voices. The banished prince, the lost heir, the one who would return. The words struck his heart like a bell. For years, Kalen had carried Illyra's promise like a shield. Now, the kingdom itself seemed to call for him as well. His exile had shaped him into more than a prince. It had made him a man who understood both suffering and strength. And as he stood on a wind-swept hill, looking back toward the land he had lost, Calin knew his journey was not yet over. The time was coming. He would return, not for vengeance, but for justice. Not just for the throne, but for the woman whose love had endured fire and shame. The years of exile had ended. The storm of return was about to begin. The kingdom of Aramis, once a jewel among nations, had grown sick. Its golden towers still reached for the sky, but the shine had dulled. Streets that once bustled with trade now echoed with hunger. Faces that once glowed with pride now bore the lines of despair. The king sat upon his throne, but he was no longer the man who had banished his son. Age had crept upon him like a thief. His hands trembled, his voice faltered, and his eyes, once sharp as steel, now carried the heavy shadow of regret. At night, when courtiers left him alone, he often stared at the empty seat where his son once stood, whispering words of sorrow that no one would hear. But the throne was not empty. Not truly. Lord Vaynor had taken its power into his own hands. Vaynor had risen like a snake, winding his way through the court with silver words and iron fists. With the king too frail to resist, Vaynor ruled in all but name. He raised taxes until commoners starved, filled his coffers with their sweat, and silenced those who dared oppose him. Guards loyal to him patrolled the streets, striking fear into hearts that once beat proudly. The nobles, bound by greed, bent to him. The people, bound by hunger, began to break. Yet, in their breaking, a spark was born. Whispers of rebellion stirred in the taverns, in the markets, even in the fields. Farmers spoke of a prince who had been wronged, a prince who had lived among the people, who understood their pain. Calin, they whispered, the banished heir. He will return. He must return. Though years had passed since his exile, the memory of the young prince had not died. His name carried weight, not because of the crown he lost, but because of the kindness he had shown before it. For the people remembered not just a prince, they remembered a man who had looked at them as equals. And in the palace itself, Elira became the quiet voice that kept this memory alive. Though branded and scorned, she had not been broken. If anything, the cruelty of the court had carved her into steel. The servants still looked to her for strength, for she carried herself with dignity no punishment could erase. She was the one who listened when others despaired, the one who risked punishment to slip bread to the hungry, the one who whispered courage into the ears of those who had none left. In the kitchens, in the laundry rooms, in the hidden corners of the palace, she spread hope like seeds in barren soil. To the nobles, she was nothing, a scarred servant too stubborn to bow. But to the weary hearts of Aramis, she was a quiet light in endless dark. Meanwhile, Lord Vaynor's grip grew harsher. The storm came without warning. Dark clouds rolled across the skies of Aramis, as if the heavens themselves had grown tired of silence. The people looked upward in fear, but in their hearts something stirred. A strange, unspoken anticipation. Change was coming. They could feel it in the air. And then, upon the mountain road leading into the city, a rider appeared. He did not wear the silks of royalty. His cloak was plain, weathered by years of travel, his boots coated in the dust of countless roads. Yet the way he sat upon his horse, tall and unyielding, spoke of a man born to lead. His face was sharper now, carved by hardship, his eyes deeper, shadowed by battles fought far from home. But to those who had once known him, there was no mistaking him. The prince had returned. Calin rode not with a great army, but with a handful of loyal companions, men and women who had followed him through years of exile, bound not by duty, but by faith in the man he had become. Some were farmers, some wanderers, others soldiers cast out by cruelty. Together, they were a small force, but their loyalty was unbreakable. When Kaelin entered the outer villages, the people stared in disbelief. At first, they thought him a ghost, a story come to life. But as he dismounted, as he walked among them, as he called them by name, names he remembered from years past, the disbelief melted into tears. "Prince Kaelin," they whispered. "Our prince! He has come back." Mothers pressed their children forward to see him. Old men fell to their knees. The broken-hearted found strength rising in their chests. Hope, long buried under ash and grief, flared like fire in dry grass. Yet Kaelin had not returned only for love of his people. He had returned for Elira. Through years of exile, her memory had been his anchor. He had thought of her in every cold night, in every battle, in every moment when despair threatened to consume him. He did not know if she lived, if she was safe, or if the cruelty of the court had destroyed her. But he had made a promise, and now he had come to fulfill it. In secret, Kaelin entered the city. His heart pounded as he slipped through alleys and broken streets, past guards who no longer fought for honor, but for fear of Vaynar's wrath. The city he had once known was wounded, walls cracked, fountains dry, laughter gone. Yet among the ruins he walked with purpose. At last, in the shadow of the palace, he saw her. Elira was no longer the timid servant girl he had loved in secret. Time had shaped her into something stronger, fiercer. The scars on her wrists had not stolen her dignity. Instead, they glowed like marks of survival. Her eyes, though weary, still held that same unyielding fire, the fire that had once drawn him to her. For a heartbeat, he simply watched her. The woman before him was both a stranger and the same soul he had carried in his heart for years. And when she turned, when her eyes met his, the world seemed to stop. "Kaelin," she breathed, disbelief and longing tangled in her voice. He stepped forward, his voice rough with years of silence. "I told you I would return." The weight of years, of pain, of separation broke in that moment. She ran to him, and he caught her, holding her as though he would never let go again. Around them, the shadows of the palace seemed to shudder, as if even stone recognized the power of their reunion. But joy could not stand unchallenged. Lord Vaynor heard of Kaelin's return, and fury lit his heart like fire. To him, the prince was not hope, but a threat, a spark that could set ablaze everything he had built. He ordered the guards to hunt Kaelin down, to silence the whispers before they grew into roars. Yet it was too late. Everywhere Kaelin walked, people followed. They poured from homes, from taverns, from fields, lifting their voices in unison. They did not see a banished prince. They saw the leader they had prayed for. The more Vaynor tried to silence the name, the louder it became. Kaelin, Kaelin, Kaelin. The city itself seemed to rise with him. Servants whispered of rebellion. Soldiers secretly shifted their loyalty. Even some nobles, weary of Vaynor's cruelty, began to look toward the prince with quiet hope. The throne of Aramis trembled, not from the might of armies, but from the force of a people remembering their worth. In the dark halls of the palace, the frail king heard the cries echoing through the city. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, a tear slid down his cheek. The son he had cast away had returned, not as a boy, but as a man strong enough to claim what was rightfully his. The storm was breaking, and Kaelin, the banished prince, stood at its heart. The palace had never felt so heavy with silence. Its grand halls, once echoing with music and laughter, now trembled beneath the weight of fear. Outside its gates, the people gathered, torches in hand, voices rising like a storm. They no longer whispered Kaelin's name. They shouted it, cried it, demanded it. The banished prince had returned, and the kingdom would never be the same. At dawn, Calin stood before his followers. Farmers gripped pitchforks, soldiers carried rusted blades, servants clutched stones. They were not trained, not armored, but their eyes burned with fire. Calin raised his voice so all could hear. "We do not fight for power," he said, steady and strong. "We fight for justice. We fight for the day when no child starves, when no voice is silenced, when love is not a crime. We fight for a kingdom that belongs to its people." A roar shook the air, carrying through the city streets and crashing against the palace walls. Inside, Lord Vaynor sneered as he fastened his dark armor. He had prepared for this moment. "The boy thinks himself a savior," he spat, "but he will die a traitor." He ordered the king's guards to stand against Calin. Though many obeyed with trembling hands, their hearts no longer his to command. The gates fell with thunder. The people surged forward, voices a wave of defiance. Calin led them, sword gleaming in the morning light. Arrows hissed through the air. Shields clashed. Steel rang against steel. The rebellion was chaos, yet out of that chaos came strength. Commoners fought beside knights who had quietly turned from Vaynor's cruelty. Every step toward the palace was soaked in blood. Every cry of pain answered by another shout of hope. Calin fought at the front, his blade cutting a path, his heart pounding not with rage, but with resolve. He did not fight to destroy. He fought to reclaim what had been stolen. Behind him, Elira moved like a shadow through the battlefield. She carried no weapon but her courage, guiding the wounded to safety, whispering words that rekindled broken spirits. Where she passed, despair lessened, and hope grew. At last, Calin burst into the throne room. The vast chamber glowed with torchlight, its golden walls now tarnished by neglect. At the far end, the king slumped on his throne, frail and silent, eyes clouded with sorrow. Beside him stood Lord Vaynor, armored in black, a cruel smile twisting his face. "So the banished son returns," Vaynor sneered. "Do you come to steal what you could not keep? To burn your father's kingdom to ash?" Calin's voice rang out. "I come to free it, from you and from the lies that have poisoned it." The king's lips parted, but no words came. He was too weak, trapped between shame and regret, forced to watch as the throne became a stage for war. Vaynor drew his blade, its edge blackened like his heart. "Then face me, boy. Let the people see their savior." Calin turned, breathing heavily, sweat and blood staining his face. His eyes found Elira, who stood tall, unbroken. He reached for her hand, and in that simple gesture, the rebellion found its heart. The king, frail and fading, whispered, "My son, forgive me." His voice cracked, but his eyes shone with relief. Calin did not answer with words, but with a steady gaze. A gaze that spoke of sorrow, of love, and of hope for something beyond the throne. The war for the throne was over. The throne itself lay in ruins, but the kingdom was alive again. The throne lay in ruins, broken into shards of stone and splinters of wood. For a moment, the great hall was silent, filled only with the crackle of torches and the heavy breath of those who had fought. And then all eyes turned to the king. He was slumped upon what little remained of his seat, his crown tilted upon his frail head. His hand shook as he reached forward, as though trying to touch the son he had once cast away. His voice came, thin but clear. "Calin, my son." Calin knelt before him, no longer as a prince before a king, but as a son before a father. The old man's eyes glistened with tears. "I was blind," the king whispered. "I thought the throne was my duty. I thought tradition was our strength, but it was pride, and fear, and it cost me my son. It cost this kingdom its heart. He looked to Elira then, her hand still entwined with Caelin's. Forgive me. I called you unworthy, but you are stronger, braver, and purer than all who sit in silk. Elira bowed her head, but her eyes shone. She had carried shame for so long that the king's words felt like chains breaking free. With trembling breath, the king pressed Caelin's hand into hers. Do not rebuild what I destroyed. Do not sit upon this throne. Lead them in a way greater than crowns and titles. Moments later, his head bowed, and the king was gone. His final act not of command, but of confession. The court stood frozen, the weight of centuries broken before them. Yet Caelin did not raise the crown, nor repair the throne. He turned instead to the people gathered in the hall. This kingdom will not be ruled by fear, nor by bloodline alone, he declared. We will build it together, not upon stone, but upon love, justice, and compassion. The words echoed, and for the first time in years they did not fall on deaf ears. Farmers, soldiers, servants, and nobles alike lifted their voices in answer. Hope filled the hall, not in whispers, but in thunder. In the days that followed, Caelin and Elira walked among the people, not as ruler and servant, not as prince and forbidden love, but as equals. Together, they listened